Basically, yeah, today we're going to be talking about the CSS position property. Um, the position property is the way that things are positioned, within the DOM and all that kind of stuff. Specifically, today we're going to be talking about three of the. One of them is pretty new, and the other ones are what I would like to call, advanced features at least of CSS. That's the new one is position sticky. Um, let's see, am I right about that? Yeah. Yeah. The new one is position sticky. Yeah, it is position sticky. And then we've got position absolute and position fixed. Um, Absolute and fixed work similar, but not the same. And that's something we'll go over. So I've got a viewer. That's good. We got someone showing up here. I'm going to go ahead and hide the chat overlay because I'm about ready to do some screen sharing here. We're gonna go for the we're gonna go to look at the code, and then we'll kind of get started. So position sticky. Let's talk about position stickies. That's the first one I'll explain. Position sticky came out. It's probably been officially supported for a couple of years now, but it first came out, I'd say, probably about 5 or more years ago, maybe more than that even. I'm trying to think if I was still in the States. If I was still in the States, it was more like 7 or 8 years ago. I think I was. Yeah. So it came out a number of years ago initially, and it was supported initially through Chrome and Firefox, and then of course uh, they had back builds that you could make it work in other browsers that didn't support it at the time. But the idea is, as you have a piece of markup on your page, as you scroll up, when you get to a certain point, it basically stops. And you've seen this before on other sites where the menu bar stays at the top no matter how much you scroll on the page. That way you can click on different menu items. You don't have to scroll all the way back to the top to click on menu items. There were a lot of ways. Even before position sticky was out, I did some of these myself manually, basically just by having two menu systems. So you'd have the main menu system, and then you could detect when that menu system was to a point that it was not seen, and then you'd pop down another one that was fixed position, and it would just stick there at the top. It would stick at the top, and then as the thing came back up, you would actually cause the other one to go away, and then they would kind of trade positions there. The new one would come in, the old one would go away, and there you go. Usually, it would happen very quickly, so that you didn't really notice what was happening. But yeah, I remember writing one like that. Even when position sticky was available, I remember writing one like that. So the concept's been around, but sticky really made it a lot easier, and that kind of stuff. So what we will do is we'll go ahead and I'll start the screen share. We will go over here. Here's our screen share, and there we go. Let's take a look. Yep, looking good. All right, so the menu item here is what we're talking about. Here is the settings. It's really, really simple. Here, I'll go ahead and I'll show the HTML first for menu container. So here's menu container. I kind of borrowed this from an earlier one. This is the nav menu that I borrowed from an earlier one. So I kind of just brought the CSS and the markup over. I put a header here just as an example to kind of showcase what I'm talking about and how this works. The idea of the header is just to give it space between the actual menu bar and the top of the page. So you've got menu container, menu. Just like I said, is just the stuff that we won't go through that. It's not that important. Matter of fact, here we can collapse this because this whole thing here came from a previous stream. I just borrowed it and brought it over here. The main point here is the menu container, as we saw, which is attached to the container outside of here. It's really simple. Sticky position is really simple. You say position sticky, and you say top the location. Now, the location is where you want the stickiness to begin. When your item that is declared position sticky should start sticking. In my case, I put top 0. Top 0 means, as you'll see as I scroll, when it hits the top 0, it stays there. Now, I could change that. I could make it top. If I define it, I have to say 2 pixels. So 2 pixels. Save that. And it will kind of have a little bit of space there now. Boom. As you see, there's a little itty bitty bit of white space there. And so it actually gives us, just a little bit of space. And if you notice, you'll be able to see the button kind of going behind it there as I scroll it back and forth. So normally what you would say is top zero. That's not an uncommon setting for it, because then it looks like it just hugs right to the top. You don't see any things passing behind it or anything like that. It's really quite simple. That's a now sticky does have some niceties to it. Um, I've seen it used in things that are especially like on the web now. If you see things that have like things ordered by alphabetically, A, B, C. It might have a header that says A, and as you scroll through all the A's, and when the B's come up, it'll go B, and it'll push it out. And there are some tricks that I don't think it's really a trick. I think honestly, if you just have all of them positioned sticky at that point, it will do it itself. Don't quote me on that though, because I've never had to do it before. I do remember seeing an article on it, and I don't think there was that much work involved in it. But if you want to do something like that, just kind of look into position sticky uh, about that, and it will show you how that works. But as you see, once again, as the position of the body gets back to where it gets close to the menu item, it scrolls back up. So it only hits it when the menu item itself would actually be positioned at top zero. Boom. And that's the only time it goes. So I've got a dog over here growling. I don't know if you can hear it. Same dog that usually interrupts in the middle of these things. Hey. And so that's what we have here. So it's, pretty basic, pretty simple overall. Nice feature though, really nice feature. If you want to add it to your site, it doesn't take much to do. I do believe that it does need to be at a top level. Don't quote me on this one either, but I initially tried it at the UL level. I tried putting it here, and it didn't work. I had to put it at the nav level up here because it was just below the body. Now, I'm not entirely sure that's true. That may not be the case. It probably also depends on where the scrollable item is. It might need to be just below. It might need to be a child just below the scrollable item for it to work. So if you're inside of a scrollable container and you want to accomplish this, it would be the immediate child of the scrollable container. In our case, the scrollable container is the body, so it needs to be at the body level. Now, once again, don't quote me on this. I didn't do enough digging into it to find out if that was the reason that it happened. I don't have a ton of time to put these things together. I try to put these things together with as much information as I can. But that's pretty much the sticky part of this. The next parts we're going to talk about here are going to be the absolute and fixed div. Okay, so we'll go into, well, first we'll take a look at this. This is a pretty basic, this is our layout. It's pretty simple. Basically, we have some JavaScript. Look at this. I actually went ahead and did some JavaScript to show. I'm going to have to refresh. I didn't do show and hide. I just did show. So, because technically I could have gone in. I guess I could have tried to figure out how to do a remove of show and all that. I said, it's hitting the refresh button over here is pretty simple, so we can just do that. So I wrote a show absolute, show fixed. So basically, I just have the two IDs here. That's why they have IDs. I've gone ahead and given them IDs. So I just do get element by ID, and then I just add the show class, and you'll see how that works here in just a minute. I also put the container here because there's a class there, and you'll see how those come in to play in just a second. But the JavaScript is basically the same. It's just adding the show class to the actual item to cause it to show. Inside of something like React, you do it a bit differently, but the idea is still the same. You'll notice here we'll start down the absolute and fixed container, and there's a reason that there's so much space between them, and you'll see why that is here in just a minute. Okay, so both of these, the absolute and fixed div, I set it 100 100, so it should normally pop about right here. But I've also got the containers, and like I said, you'll see why I did the containers here in a moment. So let's just start with this. Let's start with the basic. Let's just go ahead and let's leave them as is. We've got position fixed, position absolute, top and left, 100 100. The The visibility is hidden so you don't see them immediately. And then I set the background colors differently so you can see which one's which. Show basically just sets visibility to visible. That's it. That's all we've really done. So this is all the magic that's making what you're about ready to see work. I One of the reasons I try to make these things so minimal is because if you sit there and you put a lot of stylish and niceness to it, you might get lost in it. I want people to see the bare minimum they need to do to make something, and then you can take it from there and you can make the stylings better, and you can define the colors, and you can do all kinds of different things to make them look like something real. The idea here is to give you something that you can actually see and you can understand what's going on. So if we say show absolute div, it pops up, like I said, right about here. And there we are. It pops up there. If we say show fixed div, boom, it pops up in the exact same position. It's not as long because it has less, because the text isn't as long, but it pops up in the exact same position. Pretty simple, right? So they were both put in the same position. They're both in the same position. Okay. Let's go ahead and refresh and let's do this. Actually, we could have just done this and then refresh. Now, position absolute has, I don't know if you call it a flaw. It's not really a flaw. It basically it interacts differently with different types of position attributes. For position absolute, if you have a piece of markup, usually a div, inside of another div that has, and it can be anywhere up its parent chain. So as long as it's one of its parents, it doesn't have to be a direct parent. It could be a parent, 15 levels above for all we know. But if anything along its chain all the way up to the body is set with position relative, a div that is position absolute will take its positioning coordinates from that div, from the div where it is position relative, instead of the top left corner up in here. And so in our case, our absolute container is right here. So here's our absolute container. So if we were to make our absolute container position relative, I believe the default is called position static, and that's the one that you're never going to see when set position static, because that's just the default. So basically, if we were to set this, so this right now is set to static, so that means whenever we did our show, what happened is it positioned it relative to the body up here. So that's why it came about right here. That's 100, 100. But if we moved it down to here, it's going to fall. It's actually, and actually since it's 200, it's going to kind of get squished too. So it's going to fall and get squished down into here, as you're going to see here in just a second. So if we now make our container div position relative and we save it, now if we say show absolute div, it's going to fall down in here. Why? Because it took 100, 100 from here. And instead of from up over here, it took it from here and it went over like that. To see where it would have fallen, we can go ahead and do the fixed div. That's where it was normally falling. It was normally falling here, but because we set it position relative, it falls over here. Now, this, of course, if you're not expecting this, of course, can be a negative side effect, because if you're trying to, for example, if you're trying to write a component where you want to be able to position something relative to your item there, then you might have to take into account things like position relative. Position relative could actually be a negative thing. Now, you could also use it to your advantage too, of course. You could make that thing to where your item that is wrapping your component that also has this particular item in it, you could set it relative and then realize and then work your coordinates off of that, so you don't have to worry about it as much. So it kind of works. It can also work to your favor there. But that's what happens when you have a container that is position relative and you have an item that is position absolute. You can also do a lot of really cool effects. I wrote a site once where I wanted, when someone hovered over something, to pop something up, especially if the thing was blocked. A good example, I was writing a blog for someone at one point, and they wanted the ability to put the item out there but not have it shown until a certain date. So it would show that here's an article that's about to go live, but it's not live yet, but just kind of give them a hint at it. So what would happen is when the user went over that blog post that wasn't active yet, the item would pop up and it would give them a little message, oh, not active until, or something like that. It was something along those lines. And so, yeah, if they tried to click, it wouldn't click. It wouldn't take them to the article. It would just give them a nice little message, because the message would pop up as soon as their mouse went over the other div there. And I use position relative, position absolute to do that trick. So if you know of the trick and you can utilize it, then you can do some really neat features with it. But if you don't realize it, if you think that position absolute will always position itself to the document 0, 0, then you're going to get thrown off. You're going to get thrown off because suddenly you're going to see this thing positioning further away than what it should. You're expecting it to position here, but it ends up positioning down here, and you're going to say, what's wrong with this? And that's usually what happens. If you're using position absolute and your item is not positioning where you think it should, check to see if you've got a parent that is set position relative. And if you do, that is the issue. So just sort of to let you know. Now we're going to go ahead and comment this out. Now, position fixed works slightly different. Position absolute and position fixed use fixed position. You use an actual positioning elements, the top and left settings, and all that kind of stuff to position where they are. Absolute positioning takes it from the document, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where I am. As you see, look at fixed position. Here's a perfect example of how fixed works differently than absolute. As you see, fixed is always fixed here because fixed uses the window positioning. So fixed positions not from the document, but from the window at 0, 0 here. And so as you move this itself, it never actually moves. It stays positioned at 100, 100. So if we refresh here, let's go ahead and refresh. And if we do this, it's still going to pop up there. So that's how it works. It's positioning itself from the window, not from the document, but from the window. So you have to take that into account whenever you're using position fixed. You're fixing it to a position within the window, not a position within the document. Now, position fixed has a similar situation as position absolute does. If you are inside of a container that uses a transform, it will cause the exact same thing to happen as it does for position absolute. So now inside of our container here, we have a transform scale 1, which I believe doesn't do anything. I mean, I think it's already set to scale 1, but I just set it so that we can actually see what's going to happen. So now instead of it being positioned from here, it's going to be positioned from here. And there we go. Now it's down here. And as you can see, not only is it down here, now look what position fixed does. It stays with the item. So if this item inside of here that it's inside of were scrollable, it would stay where it is right now. But since there is no scrollable, when we're scrolling outside of it, and it has a transform property on the actual on its container element, then it stays fixed there. So now it will actually move with the item. So you've got to be careful about that. We ran into this in some of the components we were writing, where we basically had issues with where we were using a modal dialog, and the modal dialog had a transform in it that caused it to look nice when it showed. It did certain transforms and things of that nature when it showed to make it look nice. And then we put a component inside of there that was using fixed positioning, and suddenly next thing we know, it's the box that's supposed to be opening up to make people make selections isn't stuck up directly to where it's supposed to be next to the component. Instead, it's way over here. So so that was actually the first time I realized, and I don't even think many people realize that fixed positioning has that same thing like position relative with position absolute. It works the same way with position fixed. Position fixed and having a container with a transform will cause the same situation. Once again, if you understand it and you want to utilize it that way, you can. But just be forewarned, if you're going to be using that and you're expecting it to be positioning to the window, just make sure you're not inside of a parent container that has a transform on it, or else it will throw off your calculations as well. Yeah, this is, like I said, these are used for a lot of different things. You'll see it a lot. A lot of componentry out there right now uses position absolute, position fixed, position sticky. A lot of these things are very highly used features in CSS, and that's because of how well they do with different menuing systems, creating UIs that are usable, that are easily usable within websites and things like that. My date time picker uses the fixed positioning. Um, it's easier to do fixed positioning because, like I said, when you run into absolute, unless you're going to actually try to use the whole relative positioning concept within the actual component itself, you can get thrown off by having your component inside of an absolute positioning. It's less likely that you're going to run into something with a transform. Transforms more of an advanced feature. But once again, if it's something that you want to be fully reusable, you need to be able to think about these things and just know that they are there and figure out how you're going to do it. There are ways around this. Um, one of the ways is if you want to stick to using absolute, one of the ways that you can do this is instead of letting the actual markup be inside for your item that you want to display like this, be inside of some other child markup somewhere, what you can do is you can cause the markup to attach to the body. If it attaches to the body, it'll always have the 0, 0 positioning that you're looking for. So you don't have to worry about then where the calculation is. Now, that has some side effects, though. One of the side effects that I've seen with doing that, and that when I say I've seen, I've witnessed personally, is if you want to be able to detect that something inside of a hovering item like this, if you put another piece of markup in here, a lot of times what you'll want to do is, uh, for example, in my date time component, what'll happen is when it pops up, I want to be able to click to the side over here, or maybe over here and click right around in here, and I want it to go away. So what I do is I have a click detection on the item itself that goes around and it looks where that click happens. So what it does is it says, okay, if the click is not inside of my item here, then I want to actually take this and I want to cause it to close. It gets really funky when you put it in the body. When you take an item like this and you put it in the body, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to be able to detect a click on something else and see that it was also not going to hide it because it was inside of the actual item. So I wanted to have another component inside of it that I wanted to be able to click on. Well, whenever I would select a component, suddenly I called it an overlay panel. Suddenly the overlay panel would disappear. Why would it disappear? Because technically, that item that was inside of the overlay panel, when I clicked on it, the actual detection part that says where did I just click on did not follow the normal chain of events, and it appeared as if it was outside of that overlay panel, even though it is sitting inside of it. So you've got to be very careful in doing those types of tricks, and that's why for the things I've done, I've gone ahead and moved my overlay panels inside of things so that when people put stuff inside of them, then it will go ahead and when you click on another component inside of it, it won't cause the overlay panel to automatically close, thinking that it got clicked outside of it when it was actually still clicked on something that technically was inside of it. These kind of things can just drive you nuts. They really can. They can drive you nuts, and they can kind of put it over the edge there. But this is the things that you run into as you are working in these kind of things. These kind of things you come across when you're doing components, when you're doing more advanced websites, when you're doing all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to leave this like this now because for anyone that wants to take a look, I have posted the code out there. I'll repost it again afterwards if you want to take a look. Come in and play around in here and just I think you can, yeah, over here you can fork it into your own. You can have your own sandbox. Once again, This is Code Sandbox, all one word, codesandbox.io. I'll repost the link again. I have made a post from earlier this week. I think it was this week about the code and where you can find it. You can just go through my posts in my profile if you want to, but I'll go ahead and do another repost. You can fork it, you can play with it, you can try to make it look better. You can do a lot of different features with it and that type of stuff. Like I said, the position, there isn't really all that much to talk about because we're really just talking about one single CSS property, but so many different things that you can do, and so many things that are common to see in modern websites, and a lot of them based around the position property in CSS. Hopefully you've kind of started to understand how things work, where the pitfalls are, and how to use some of these things. Maybe they aren't pitfalls, maybe they're advantages in the case of position relative or things like that. Maybe there's actually an advantage to knowing that trick and maybe using it to create more advanced UIs. Let me see here. Yep. So, looks like we will hit about 30 minutes. I was worried that maybe I wouldn't get to slice it to about 30 minutes today, but it looks like maybe I will. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and stop the sharing. And